So, I'm recording this audio on October 23rd. It's 2 a.m. at night. And at the time of recording this audio, I don't know if the Canucks went out there and made any moves, if anybody was traded, if anybody was fired, or if anybody sold the team. Hey, you know what? That might sound like a pretty good idea right now. But either way, there's been nothing that has changed with the organization from the time the Buffalo Sabres game ended to the time that I'm talking into this microphone on this night. I had just wrapped up watching All Hallows Eve. I thought it had a very nice third act and ending. I thought the way that it was wrapped up was really nice. Of course, it wasn't the best movie. Most DVD direct-to-video splatter films aren't necessarily that. But it was still a nice, fun watch. I'm thinking of a 4.5 out of 10. Before I go out there and watch Terrifier to wrap up my night, I wanted to get some thoughts out from the Vancouver Canucks fan perspective that kind of just indicates the hopelessness that surrounds this team at the moment. This is going to be uploaded hopefully at sometime 3 p.m. PST, October 23rd, so about 13-ish hours from the time I'm talking in this microphone to the time you're going to hear this audio on YouTube. But assuming the Vancouver Canucks keep everything the same, which I kind of have reason to believe they're going to do, it becomes more difficult to try to assess where the team can go and what steps the team can go out there and make to change their fate. Because ultimately, 5 games, 6 games into a regular season, and you look at all the context surrounding this team heading into the year. They were supposed to be competitive. They had unfinished business. That in which is apparently a slogan they're not using anymore. It's now our pursuit, quote-unquote. I know our pursuit refers to the playoffs and potentially the cup, but how about our pursuit for a win, huh? Try that first and foremost. But either way, they were talking about this on 650 the other night after the game, but it doesn't really feel like a trade or a firing or something is what's needed at this point. I get you can say, okay, we'll just fire X person, hire Y person, and make this trade, get this draft pick, and all of a sudden, boom, you're good again, because the way this team has assembled itself, the way they've committed so much of their future to guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson and to guys like JT Miller, right now, the way the team is, it's hard to really feel any sense of direction. And I know that's mostly dictated because of the results. If the team had just won their first 4 games, which they were very much capable of doing, let's say they're 4-1-1 right now. We're not having this conversation. Sure, even if they play the Buffalo game yesterday the same way they did, which was apathetic, it was filled with defensive lapses, it was hanging out Thatcher Demko to dry, it was not a fun game for fans in the arena to sit down and watch, even though it's the home opener. This is supposed to be the easiest game of the year for you because you got everybody in the stadium chanting your players' names. You got this super hype Hollywood-style movie-like intro for your team, and you've got the player announcements. Everybody's excited, everybody's hyped. It's supposed to be an easy dub when it comes to feeding off the momentum and giving the fans something to cheer about. Even if you lose that game in the same way they did yesterday, which was absolutely terribly, we're still not having the conversation as to what the hell is wrong with this team. Sure, teams are allowed to have bad games. And yesterday, you could very much say it was just a bad game. But contextually speaking, with how this team was already crapping the bed earlier in the week, the Edmonton game, the first game of the season, that was 10 days ago. Well, it's 11 for you, 10 for me, but you get what I mean. 10 days is all it took for Vancouver Canucks fans to completely start burning their jerseys. There are videos of that, by the way, on Twitter. Don't go out there and watch it. It's kind of bad for the soul, I feel. There were 3 or 5 something jerseys thrown on the ice last night. All it took was 10 days for things to turn around so drastically in terms of mood, fan reception, fan reaction, and overall attitude with this hockey team. Every team is allowed to have a bad game, and the Buffalo game was a bad one, but for a team that's already blown so much, they're the only winless team in the NHL this year. That's crazy. Arizona, Seattle, Montreal, they all have more wins than Vancouver and a significantly higher amount at that. It's crazy. And this is kind of why I'm saying that a trade or a firing, like, none of this stuff is going to fix things right now. You think if someone gets traded or they trade for a guy immediately, things are going to change? No, it's not going to work like that. Sure, if they get a right-handed defenseman, let's say they trade away Jonathan Lekkerimäki and they get a defenseman, because obviously, rebuilding on the fly, that's kind of what happens with these things, especially when Francesco Aquilini is the guy telling you at the top that you need to make the playoffs every year. Let's say they do that and the team gets better. That was never really the issue, honestly. Like, you look at the players on this team, Mikheyev, Kuzmenko, Podkolzin, Miller, Horvat, whatever, these guys are all so much better than what we have been seeing. And that's kind of why there was always this benefit of the doubt in the back of my mind, because the first 4 games of the year, they could have won those. They could have won those realistically. It's not even me saying, oh, if Demko just made this miraculous sprawling save where he Spider-Man'd his way up behind his back, like, that's not even it. It's just if they didn't blow those leads, they could have been 4-1-1 realistically on the year, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. There's something wrong with this team when it comes to their mental fortitude, when it comes to the overall attitude of everybody on the ice. They're all making defensive lapses. No one's being held accountable. There's this country club cliquiness that's been circulating around as a rumor on how the team is assembled internally. And trading for a right-handed defenseman is not going to fix that. Firing somebody is not going to fix that. You want to talk about Bruce Boudreau and the bad start they had with the Anaheim Ducks back in 2015 or whenever the heck it was, when they were 1-7-X, whatever the last number was, to kick off the year, and then they won the division at the end? Vancouver is supposed to be a team that on paper, if you have a 90-point player in Miller, you have maybe an 80-point player in Patterson, you have a 70-point defenseman in Hughes, you have a 35-goal scorer in Horvat, you have a 25 to 30-goal scorer in Brock, you have a 25-goal scorer in Mikheyev, you have a 20-goal scorer in Garland, and a 20-goal scorer in Kuzmenko. You have maybe 30 points from OEL. This team is supposed to be so much better, but they're just not. And for Rutherford, yesterday Rutherford had the after-hour segment where he said all the things that you feel really good to hear. We're trying to get younger. We need to get younger players in the lineup. All the good stuff. There were some really alarming things thrown in there too, like the fact that they want to rebuild on the fly, and the fact that real life is not like fantasy hockey. You can't just make trades for whoever. I get that. And I kind of believe it when Rutherford says, even though things suck right now, the worst thing they could do is make a panic move. You can't make a panic move. Sure, taking a look at where this team is and where they're going in the future, things look very bleak. From the first 6 games, this is not a good hockey team. But going into the future, what else is there to cheer about then? Miller and OEL are on this team till the end of the decade, and they're not going to be getting any better as their careers and their contracts go on. You talk about this team going out there and signing JT to a massive extension, so much to the point that Bo Horvat might actually be on his way out because the team can't afford to keep their captain anymore, and they start out the season like this. All it took was 6 games, 10 days for JT Miller's entire fan base reputation to be wiped out. And I'm befuddled at the fact that that happened. Because even I was saying, Miller looks good enough to get that kind of money. He's a 99-point caliber guy, but this season, I don't know if it's because Hughes has been sick the whole time or Hughes has been injured and now he was taken out of the lineup for the home opener, that he's making his bad passes and everything. Maybe that's why Miller hasn't found his groove yet, because we know that Miller, the majority of the points and the production that Miller got last season was because he was every second touch on the power play. And you could look at all the other videos that we made about Miller discussing his production and everything, because I said, there are players in the NHL that get 100 points. You could talk about guys that got 90 points that are close. You talk about Panarin, Marner, Tkachuk, Matthews, Huberdeau, some of these guys that were in the 100-point caliber. JT Miller is not in the same tier as Steven Stamkos. He's not in the same tier as Kirill Kaprizov. He's not in the same tier as Johnny Gaudreau. He's not in the same tier as Draisaitl. He wasn't in the same tier as any of the guys that got 90 points either. And I said that earlier. He's good enough at scoring points because he's every second touch that he'll be able to get paid, and you could justify it because he's getting 99 points on the year. And he was a point-per-game player with Vancouver the majority of the time he was here as well. But now it's like, yeah, no, that is all down the drain, and it's not like you can trade this guy. You know they're not going to, right? If they trade Miller tomorrow, if they trade Miller anytime soon, it's going to be a miracle. But for now, things have just looked so bad that all I can do is ask, what's next? Because I can't really foresee a trade or anything happening in the short-term future. If there is a trade, then I guess we'll can this video and make a video about that trade instead, but you can talk in the comments your thoughts about the Vancouver Canucks and what to do now. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj Rolls 99. I gotta go ahead and watch Terrifier because I want to get my clown horror movie fix. And bye.